Okay, so let's talk about the pros and the cons of having an emergency fund. Well, if you guessed right, you probably guessed that there's a whole bunch of pros and very little cons. Let's go over them real quick. What are some pros? If you have an emergency, a financial emergency, and you have an emergency fund, you're going to avoid having to use your credit card, right? Using your credit card is like treading water without a life jacket. You're just out there in the deep end and you keep treading water. Eventually you're going to run out of energy and sink to the bottom of the pool. Using a credit card and not paying it off every month, using a credit card as your emergency fund, that's kind of like treading water, okay? If you have the emergency fund, you can avoid tapping into retirement. Your 401k, your IRA, your Simple, your SEP, whatever types of retirement you have set up, if you have the emergency money, you'll avoid tapping into it. Why is that important? Because almost always, not always, watch some of our retirement videos, but almost always, when you tap into a retirement account, you're going to get penalized and you're going to have to pay taxes. So using your retirement accounts as an emergency fund doesn't make a lot of sense. When you have an emergency fund, the pro, you don't have to touch those retirement accounts in emergencies. When you have the emergency money, you can avoid tapping the home equity. Right now, home values are going down. Maybe one day they'll go back up. But why would you take money out of your home when it's losing value? That's not a smart money move. That doesn't build a strong financial house, okay? So you can avoid having to use your home equity. If you have this emergency money, you can avoid payday loans. And if you have the emergency money, big pro, we've talked about it a couple of times, peace of mind. What are some cons of having the emergency fund? Well, there are none. There are zero. No, I'm just kidding. There really are no cons in my mind to having an emergency fund, but some people would argue that all this money that you set aside, whether it's 1 month, 5 months, 6 months, a year of expenses, sits there and gets eaten away by inflation. And that's partially true if you're not in some sort of interest-bearing FDIC insured account. In other words, a savings account that gives you some interest that's protected by the government. If you're not in there, inflation is going to eat you up just a little bit. But this money is not meant to grow. Remember, it's supposed to be safe first. We're going to lose a little bit of safety as inflation eats it up, but that's the price of peace of mind. Okay, so some people would say inflation eats away, and that could be a con of having a big emergency fund. I can't argue with that, but I can't support it either. The other con, if you want to list cons, this is weak con to having an emergency fund, is that it eats into your cash flow every month. Remember, if you're making $3,000 a month, and let's say instead of the $3,000 in expenses, you have $2,000 in expenses. And then you got to make your contribution to your emergency fund every month. We'll say it's $100. So your expenses aren't $2,000, they're $2,100. Well, you're eating into your cash flow. That's $100 you can't go to the movies with or go out to eat with, okay? Is that a con? Some people would argue yes. I would say no. But I present all the information and let you make the decision, okay? So again, the pros and the cons to having an emergency fund, pros far outweigh the cons. But now you're informed all about emergency fund, and you can make your own decision on if you should have one. You should, but you can make your own decision. We'll see you in the next video.